My wife betrayed me by cheating and calling me mediocre before I uncovered the truth and planned ruthless revenge that destroyed our marriage forever. I walked into the garage and froze when I heard my wife on the phone. It was a regular Wednesday and I was out there on trash duty like always. Our driveway light cast a faint glow on the cement floor, illuminating a small oil stain from my car that I kept meaning to clean up. In that half-light, I noticed Sabrina was in the driver's seat of her SUV, the engine off, her phone pressed to her ear. She didn't see me come in. I only caught a few words at first, but they were enough to sense the tension in her voice. "He's just so dull," she said. "Yeah, exactly. I married down. He's a mediocre man with average everything." My legs locked, my chest felt tight. I'd been carrying 2 large black trash bags, and for a moment, I couldn't move. Then came another voice on speaker, her sister Pamela by the sound of it. I heard a short burst of laughter flooding through the phone's tiny speaker. "You can always upgrade after the mortgage is paid off," Pamela said with a giggle that made me feel vaguely nauseous. Sabrina let out a slow sigh. "I know. I should have gone with James. He's accomplished so much more. Seth is stuck in the same position at the same pay, doing the same worthless tasks day in and day out." I stood stunned behind our garbage bin. My first instinct was to burst in there, to ask why the heck she was saying those things. Yet something in me, maybe sheer shock, kept me rooted in place. I realized she hadn't once mentioned wanting to fix anything between us. She spoke as though it was all decided, like I was just an embarrassing relic from her 20s she lived with out of obligation. "He's average at everything else, too, if you know what I mean," she continued. Pamela's laughter chimed in again. "Like I said, sis, you can always upgrade after you're done benefiting from him financially." That was the moment I discovered how quickly love can sour into something else, a bizarre mix of fury and shame. My cheeks burned. My lungs forgot how to breathe. I felt like an intruder in my own life. Finally, I managed to step backward, creeping away before she could spot me. My heart hammered so loudly I was sure she'd hear it. Clutching the trash bags, I left the garage like a ghost. I said nothing. Despite the shock, I was oddly calm during dinner that night. Sabrina slid a plate of chicken and vegetables toward me, asking about my day with a casual smile. "Just the usual," I said. She had no idea I'd heard everything. My mind replayed her words. "I'm married down. A mediocre man with average everything." They carved themselves under my skin, but I kept my composure. If she wanted to hide her true feelings, fine. I would learn to hide mine, too. Over the next couple of weeks, I paid closer attention to her habits. She'd been working late more often. She hid her phone whenever I entered a room. I saw text notifications pop up with names I didn't recognize. She'd type replies quickly, then delete them, clearing any trace. My gut told me she was seeing someone, though I didn't want to believe it outright. Deciding I needed answers, I checked her phone while she was in the shower. Her passcode was easy to guess, the street address of her childhood home. There it was, James. Their messages scrolled with a tragic inevitability. Many said, "If only things had been different," or "I missed the way we used to talk," and always ended with something suspiciously open-ended. There were references to secret meetups, coffees, dinners, always with that flirty subtext. Then I found the real kicker, an entire bank account in her name only with something around $20,000. It had been amassed over the last year without my knowledge. I photographed it all. If Sabrina saw me with her phone, it might turn into a shouting match I'd lose control over. So, I put it back, exactly where I found it. From that moment, I felt everything shift. The shock bled away, and a new sense of awareness took its place. I did not confront her. I did not threaten. Instead, I gathered documents, copying everything that might matter if we ended up in court: pay stubs, mortgage details, credit card statements. I made a little folder in my Google Drive titled Exit Strategy. However, I'd be lying if I said my anger stayed in check. Late at night, I lay awake, replaying all the nights I'd given her foot massages because she was tired, all the times I'd forgone personal desires so we could save for a shared dream. I realized I'd never truly known her. She didn't just slip up once. She actively mocked me. Worse, she never tried to talk about her dissatisfaction. Instead, she ran to James and apparently vented to her sister. Eventually, I tailed her on one of her late nights at work. Watching from my car a block away, my phone camera poised, I caught her hugging James on the sidewalk outside a trendy bistro. He kissed her cheek and guided her inside. I took a few snapshots. Inside, I'm sure my heart was cracking, but outwardly, a numbness carried me. When she came home, she gave me the same false smile, the same, "oh, dinner was boring" story. Still, I stayed quiet. A month later, I snapped, but it wasn't in the way you might expect. I didn't scream or weep. Instead, I methodically emptied my closet into 3 suitcases and left my wedding band on the counter next to a note that read, "Don't try to find me." I drove to my old friend Dennis's place. He had a spare room and no illusions about how complicated marriages can get. I told him everything. He listened, shrugged, and said, "The room's yours as long as you need it." Sabrina flooded my phone with texts and missed calls. "Are you okay? Where are you? I'm so worried about you. Please come back and let's talk." I ignored them all. My calm had turned into something colder, sharper. I let her stew. She couldn't spin the story her way if I refused to engage. In the weeks that followed, I quietly set about dismantling the life we shared, freezing joint accounts, transferring half the funds, contacting a lawyer for advice on next steps. I read countless stories from others who'd been cheated on, and the overwhelming recommendation was keep your composure and gather evidence. Don't let them see what you have until it's absolutely necessary. But during that time, something inside me started to twist. My anger grew into a throbbing determination to get even, to punish not just Sabrina, but James too. We all have moments where we toy with the idea of revenge, but I found myself going beyond daydreams. I relished the thought of humiliating him. More than that, I craved doing something that would leave him shaking. My therapist, whom I ended up seeing once I realized I needed an outlet, warned me that I was flirting with a dangerous obsession. But I rarely told the therapist the full story, so she had no idea how dark my thoughts were getting. Eventually, I found out precisely who James was professionally. LinkedIn is a wonderful tool if you know how to snoop. I read about his new promotions, his volunteer activities, likely done for show, his personal mission statements, his firm handshake in the posted selfies, a classic hotshot with money. I seethed, hating him for everything he'd achieved, especially the infiltration into my marriage. Some nights, I would pace around Dennis's spare room, unable to sleep, and imagine confronting James. It took only minimal effort to figure out where James lived. He posted plenty on social media, fancy lunches at downtown spots, a condo in an upscale building, a trip to a nearby forest preserve for mindful hiking. My unhinged curiosity led me to stalk his schedule. He used the same coffee shop every Tuesday morning. He posted from that forest preserve about once a month. He was also seeing Sabrina on the side. All that stoked my resentment. Yes, my wife's betrayal hurt, but in a twisted way, the more I fixated on James, the more I convinced myself it was him I needed to break. The husband they wrote off as mediocre was about to do something. It began subtly. I decided to show Sabrina that I wasn't as meek as she believed. One evening, exactly 3 months after I left, she started texting me, "We need to talk, please. I'm sorry. Let's meet." I thought about ignoring her but changed my mind. She was useful as a link to James. We arranged to meet at a small diner just off the interstate. She arrived looking worn down, eyes rimmed in red, no makeup. "Seth," she whispered. "Oh my God, you look different." I had indeed changed. After leaving, I'd worked out relentlessly, more for stress relief than anything else, but it gave me broader shoulders and a sharper expression. She stared at me as if remembering that once upon a time she might have been genuinely attracted to me. "What do you want?" I waited for her to speak. "I want to apologize," she began. I never wanted you to leave like that. I lost myself, okay? I was unhappy. I felt stuck. It was stupid to talk to James. She wanted to keep speaking, but I cut her off. "I'm not here to talk about us getting back together. That's not an option." Her expression sagged. "I know, She swallowed, blinking. "I'm not making excuses for how I handled things, but if you care at all about what we had, 8 years of marriage, Seth, please, can you just let me talk to you about the finances? The bank is threatening foreclosure. I can't do this alone." She was trembling, but all I could think about was how I'd found out she called me average everything behind my back. Any empathy I might have once felt was drowned under cold disgust. While she tried to explain about late mortgage payments and upcoming bills, I found my mind wandering to James again, and the plan I'd been hatching for weeks. I interrupted her. "Does James know about your money troubles?" She hesitated, eyes flickering away. Then she admitted he stopped seeing me a month ago. He claimed he needed space or something, so he bailed on her. Typical. She was alone with her illusions and tatters, needing me to bail her out. While I didn't care if she sank, I saw an opportunity to push my next step. "I can help you," I said evenly, "but there's something I need from you first." She looked up, eyebrows pinched. "Okay, what?" "James's schedule," I said. "I know you still text occasionally." She stiffened. "Seth, why?" "Because I want to talk to him," I said. "I have some business with him." If you want me to sign any documents that'll help you manage this foreclosure process more easily, then you'll do what I ask. Otherwise, deal with the bank on your own." She stared at me in a way I'd never seen before, with fear. Perhaps she realized I had finally stepped into territory that was beyond heartbreak. This was personal vengeance. "All right," she said quietly. "I can tell you what I know." She scribbled a few details. James's typical whereabouts, the times he usually left work, the route he took. I thanked her, got up, and left her with the check. As I strode to my car, I didn't feel guilt. I felt a dark thrill. James was easy to track. Late on a Thursday, around 8 p.m., he strolled out of the office building Sabrina had indicated. He wore a navy blazer over pressed slacks, looking every bit the upwardly mobile professional. I watched him from my SUV, engine idling, a baseball cap pulled low over my brow. I'd parked a few spots away from his sleek sedan. My pulse hammered in my temples. This was it. I'd never done anything like this in my life. My anxious mind kept picturing worst-case scenarios, but I shoved them aside. I was determined to prove I wasn't some pathetic doormat. He got into his sedan. I waited until he pulled out, then followed him along the dark roads that snaked out of the city. I knew exactly where I wanted to go. An old abandoned logging road in a wooded area about 40 minutes beyond the suburbs. I used to hike there on weekends, but it was deserted now, the old trails overgrown, the main path dotted with no trespassing signs. Perfect for what I had in mind. The entire drive I imagined Sabrina's words, "He's accomplished so much more." I married down. If James was so superior, let's see how he fared under real pressure. It wasn't hard to coerce him off the main highway. I bumped into his car from behind at a lonely intersection where no cameras were installed. He pulled over. I parked behind him, jumped out, and rapped on his window. "What the hell, man?" he exclaimed, lowering the window halfway. "Dude, I'm sorry," I lied, playing the frantic motorist. "I just lost my brakes. Are you okay? Let's pull over further up the road, out of this intersection." He muttered curses but nodded, perhaps annoyed enough to follow. I pointed to a shadowy side road. "A few hundred yards in," I said. We parked. The area was lined with towering trees, the place silent except for a faint breeze. Perfect. He stepped out of his sedan, phone in hand. Before he could start snapping photos, I moved behind him and clamped a cloth soaked in a sedative over his mouth and nose. It was a trick I'd read about to incapacitate someone quickly. He struggled, limbs flailing, but I had the advantage of surprise and adrenaline. Within moments, he sagged, losing consciousness. My heart pounded so violently I felt unsteady, but I moved with single-minded focus. I popped his trunk, yanked out a few gym items he had stuffed there, and then dragged him to my SUV instead, tossing him in my trunk. I'd reinforced the cargo space with plastic lining beforehand. My hands shook, but I forced myself to keep going. The entire abduction took maybe 2 minutes, just enough time that if a passerby had driven by, I could have been done for. But no one came down that old road. I drove deeper into the forest, my knuckles white on the wheel. My stomach churned from the risk, yet a certain grim satisfaction settled in. This is what it meant to take control, to stop being the convenient doormat and become the person who decided others' fates. 20 minutes along a winding, overgrown path, I parked by a small clearing. There used to be a logging site there, empty now, ringed by trees that blocked out the moonlight. I took a deep breath, popped open the trunk, pulled out James's limp form, and propped him against a stump. Then I used zip ties to secure his wrists. Over his head, I slipped a black cloth bag, letting him remain half unconscious for a while. I splashed water on his face until he sputtered awake. He started to thrash but quickly realized he was tied up and blindfolded. "Who? What?" His voice was garbled. I brought a small flashlight, shining it in his face through the bag. He squirmed in the sudden brightness. "Don't worry, big man," I said quietly. "We're just going to settle a few things you took from me." "Whoa, what?" "I don't even know you," he said, trembling. "Oh, but you do," I replied, letting that hang in the air. "You stole something of mine. My wife's affection. Now you'll pay." He shook his head, gasping. "You're insane." Sabrina said what? I snarled. "That I was average? That I married down? That you're better than me? Let's see how that holds up out here." I undid the zip ties but kept the hood on. Then I yanked him up by his collar. "Dig," I said, tossing him a shovel. "Right there. If you try to run, I'll put a bullet in your kneecap." He stammered. "Why? What are you—" I didn't answer, just shoved the shovel into his hands, forcing him to plunge it into the dirt. The forest was quiet except for the occasional clank of metal on rock. James panted in terror. I paced behind him, letting the muzzle of my Colt rest near his shoulder. Yes, I had procured a pistol. It wasn't fully legal, purchased through a shady online deal, but it was real enough to blow a hole in him if I chose. Toss the dirt aside, I said, calm but chilling. Make it deep. He actually whimpered. Are you going to end me? Keep digging, I replied. For several minutes he did. The hole grew about 3 feet deep. His breathing fractured, his shoulders coated with sweat and dirt. He kept trying to shift the hood, glimpsing me from underneath. Each time he did, I jammed the Colt into his side. Finally, he said, I'm sorry. I didn't know you were still, I believed her when she said you'd abandoned her. She told me you were out of the picture. My mouth curled into a bitter smile. She told me you were out of the picture. Funny how that works. He let out a sob, the shovel slipping from his fingers. Please, man. Please, I regret it. Okay, she and I were never serious. I fired a shot into the air. The blast ripped through the stillness like a tear in the night. James dropped to his knees, covering his head in abject terror. A high-pitched cry, something primal, tore from his throat. Keep crying, I said, stepping around the pit. Shout all you want, there's no one around to hear. He was shaking so badly that I almost felt pity. Almost. But then I remembered all the humiliating messages, the stolen embraces, the dinners meant to woo her away. I stood there, pointing the pistol at him. My heart hammered, but I refused to let fear show in my voice. What did you think was going to happen? I snarled. Think I just vanished while you enjoyed what used to be mine? He crawled to the edge of the hole. I stepped closer, feeling the power in every breath. My finger grazed the trigger, and for a single second, I wondered if I might actually go too far. Then I forced myself to step back. I fired another shot, intentionally wide, into a tree trunk. You're lucky you're not worth a bullet, I hissed. This isn't how I solve problems yet. He collapsed on the ground, sobbing. I pulled the cloth off his head, letting him finally see. My face must have looked monstrous in the shaky flashlight beam. Seth, he whimpered. God, look, please, I'm sorry, don't do this. I let him cry, let him sputter apologies. Then softly I said, now you know you can never see her again. You can never mention me to the cops, or I'll deny everything. I have the resources to ruin your career. I'll countersue for alienation of affection, for emotional distress, for anything I can. Do you want to risk it? He shook his head desperately. Then you'll keep your mouth shut, I said with finality, and maybe you'll learn a lesson about messing with another man's wife.
I yanked him to his feet, letting him see the shallow grave he dug. Remember how close you came tonight, I whispered. Then I punched him once in the gut. He doubled over, retching.
I turned, hopped in my SUV, and sped off, leaving him in the dark, alone with the mound of dirt and the stench of fear.
The adrenaline roared through my veins for the entire drive back.
My head pounded. My chest felt tight. Part of me couldn't believe I'd done it. Another part was exultant, thinking, they called me mediocre. Let's see how they handle a man who doesn't know his own limits. I returned to Dennis's place, parked in the garage, and walked inside with a sheen of sweat covering my forehead. Dennis was out for the evening, which spared me any awkward interrogation. I locked myself in the bathroom and stared at my reflection in the mirror. I barely recognized the man looking back. My eyes were bloodshot, my expression taut with tension. I turned on the faucet, splashed cold water on my face, and tried to slow my breathing. I couldn't help but reflect. I had truly threatened a man with a firearm. I'd forced him to dig his own grave. A part of me asked if I'd crossed a line of no return. But then I remembered the crippling humiliation I'd felt all these months. This newfound sense of power was more potent than fear. 2 days later, Sabrina called me in a visible panic. I answered, curious. Yes, Seth, she whispered. I talked to James. He's shaken up. What the hell did you do? I rolled my shoulders, tensing at the creeping anxiety in her voice. What? I had to, I replied, to make sure he understands not to come near you again. She sucked in a breath. Seth, that's insane. You can't just... What's insane, I interrupted, is thinking you both could walk all over me without consequence. Have you forgotten that you shoved me aside, called me mediocre, moved on with James while I was footing the bills? She tried to argue, less from real moral ground and more out of alarm. I never thought you'd disappear and come back like this. I'm sorry. I was frustrated, but I never wanted it to go this far. You started it, I said coldly. Now you're reaping the results. She bowed her head in shame. At least that's what I pictured from the elongated silence on the phone. Finally, she said, please don't do anything else. I need your help with the bank. She explained that the house was about to go under, that the mortgage was in arrears, the money she'd squirreled away was gone, spent on whatever illusions she'd chased with James. If we didn't do something, we'd face foreclosure. It would hurt both our credit scores. I smirked. You want my help now? She swallowed. It's the only way we can salvage something. If the bank seizes the house, we both lose everything. I considered the pros and cons. Letting her go bankrupt might be a sweet second-tier revenge. but it would also torpedo my financial standing. I wasn't quite the unstoppable renegade I fancied myself to be. I had a credit score, a future to think of. It was better to handle it strategically. "All right," I said, "but we do it with conditions. I'm in control." She gave a shaky agreement, too worn out to resist. Realizing I had her where I wanted, I scheduled a set of meetings with the bank and a real estate agent. My plan was to short sell the property, splitting any leftover debt, but with me manipulating the documents, so Sabrina paid the lion's share. I had no qualms about turning the screws further. Meanwhile, I diverted some of my attention to meeting new people. I signed up for a local networking group that met at bars on Friday nights. It was there I met a woman named Celeste, a friend of Dennis's colleague, attractive, sharp-witted, a bit edgy. Over beer and onion rings, we flirted. She asked, "So, what's your story?" I could have told her a sanitized version, but I found myself giving hints of truth. "I'm going through a divorce. My wife had an affair. I left." Celeste's eyebrows rose sympathetically. "That's a lot. Are you okay?" I shrugged, unaccustomed to real concern. I managed. She and I started texting, then going out for casual meals. A month later, she stayed over at my new apartment. I didn't consider it love, not yet, but it was comforting to have someone whose presence signaled a fresh start. I never told her the details, never revealed the night I made James dig a grave in the woods. She mistook my guardedness for heartbreak. If only she knew it was something darker that gnawed at me, a sense that power could be taken by force. Throughout this period, my phone conversations with Sabrina were purely transactional. We negotiated the house short sale. She'd grown silent, subdued. I could sense her fears simmering beneath every call. The final straw came when the buyer's bank demanded a last-minute inspection. Sabrina called me in tears, claiming something was wrong with the roof, an urgent repair that could sink the deal. Celeste looked at me with mild concern as I grabbed my car keys. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I replied. "Just dealing with some leftover property drama." "You sure you don't want me to come?" she offered. "I can help if it's a property thing. I used to watch a lot of those renovation shows." I forced a half laugh. "Better I handle this alone. Thanks, though." I drove out to the old house, our house once. The lawn had grown scraggly, the porch light was off. When I walked in, the living room was cluttered with boxes. Sabrina paced near the fireplace, eyes ringed with exhaustion. On the table sat accounts and receipts, an avalanche of stress. "Hey," she said softly, "I'm sorry to drag you into this, but I need you to sign these so we can hire a contractor for the roof." "Fine," I answered. My eyes drifted over the worn couch, the blank TV screen. We used to watch dumb comedies there on Friday nights. The ghost of that memory made me scowl. As I was signing, Sabrina said, "He told me what you did." I looked up. "Who?" she glared. "You know who. James." I set my jaw. "Then he told you I gave him a chance to keep his mouth shut." She wrapped her arms around her torso, as if protecting herself from a chill. "I'm scared, Seth. You're not the man I remember. Neither are you," I retorted. "I guess we bring out each other's worst." She sank into a kitchen chair, tears welling in her eyes. "You have every right to hate me. I said awful things, but you've gone off the deep end." I put down the pen. "That's for me to decide." We exchanged no more words. I signed everything that would get the roof patched. She stared at me, looking like she wanted to beg for my humanity, but I had none to spare. I left without explanation. By the end of that month, the short sale was complete. Due to how we structured the expenses, she took a heavier financial hit than me. I felt no remorse. Celeste and I decided to move in together after 4 months of dating. Too soon, maybe, but I liked controlling the environment. We chose a modern loft on the other side of town, floor-to-ceiling windows, polished concrete floors, a minimalist vibe. It was a stark contrast to the suburban dread I'd left behind. Dennis joked that I'd become a big shot. Sabrina had taken a humiliating series of stumbles, working a lesser job, living in a tiny apartment she could barely afford, fielding calls from debt collectors. I heard all this through mutual friends or from her occasional text messages, which I rarely answered. My vengeance was complete, or so I thought. One night, just before midnight, there was a pounding on our front door. It startled Celeste and me awake. I flung on some clothes and hurried to see who it was. Peering through the peephole, I glimpsed long, dark hair and a familiar face twisted in wild desperation. "Sabrina, open up," she yelled. "Seth, I know you're in there." Celeste appeared behind me, rubbing her eyes. "Who is that?" she asked. "My ex," I grunted. "Stay back, Seth." Sabrina's voice came through the door. "I just found out from friends that you have a new girlfriend. You're just like that. You moved on with someone else. Are you serious?" I rolled my eyes. We're divorced, why shouldn't I? Open the door, let's talk, she hollered. Celeste put her hand on my arm. Should we call the police? I hesitated, but after all the trouble Sabrina caused, I was done. Yes, I said calmly. I think we might have to. But before I could even pull out my phone, Sabrina must have realized the building's security might eventually intervene. Driven by an unknown mania, she managed to slip in behind another tenant exiting the stairwell. Suddenly, the door flung open, and Sabrina burst into our living space. You bastard, she hissed, turning her gaze on Celeste. So this is your new conquest, huh? You just replaced me? Celeste tried to back away, but Sabrina lunged. He's still my husband, you. Get away from him. Her voice was shrill, unhinged. Celeste fended her off with both arms, but Sabrina clawed at Celeste's hair. I rushed forward, grabbing Sabrina's arms, trying to pry her away. Sabrina spat curses, tears streaming down her face, accusing me of destroying her life, humiliating her, leaving her in debt, driving James away. This was all your plan, right? To ruin me and then run off with a new fling. Celeste twisted free of Sabrina's grasp, staggering back. Your ex-wife is completely insane, she stammered. No, you don't know the half of it, Sabrina shouted, pointing at me. He threatened James with a gun, made him dig a freaking grave. He's not the victim you think he is. Celeste stared at me, eyes wide with uncertainty. She hadn't known that detail. The look on her face stung me with something resembling guilt. Sabrina swung around, a wild fist aimed at Celeste. I intercepted it, twisting her arm until she yelped. The furious mania in her eyes was matched by a raw heartbreak. That was when the cops arrived, summoned by the building security who'd heard the commotion. They charged in, ordering everyone to stand down. Sabrina was the one who appeared the aggressor in that moment, cornering Celeste, rage in her voice. In less than a minute, they had her handcuffed, forcibly guiding her to the hallway. She kept screaming accusations over her shoulder, telling anyone who would listen that I was a psychopath, that I kidnapped James. You're going to pay, Seth, she spat as the officers hauled her away. You hear me? This isn't over. The commotion carried on in muffled form out near the elevator. A policeman took my statement while Celeste stood trembling in the corner. They asked if we wanted to press charges. Of course, I said. Sabrina had burst into my home uninvited, assaulting my girlfriend. The cops read Sabrina her rights. She locked her gaze on me with pure, blazing hatred. Then the elevator door slid shut, taking her away, the reflection of overhead lights gleaming on her tear-streaked face. For one long minute, I stood in my living room, heart hammering, the adrenaline pounding. Celeste was breathing hard, disheveled. Our modern loft's calm aesthetic was shattered by the chaos that just occurred. I looked at the front door, forced halfway open on its hinges, and I heard Sabrina's screams echo in my ears. The cops left shortly after, taking Sabrina to the station. Celeste asked if what Sabrina had shouted about James was true. I hesitated. Perhaps she saw the flicker of guilt and anger in my eyes. Seth, she whispered shakily, what did she mean when she talked about you and a cult? I opened my mouth to respond, but no words emerged. In that fraught, pulsing air between us, I realized it didn't matter whether I admitted it or lied. The damage was done. I stared at Celeste, whom I'd hoped would never see that side of me. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was one of the police officers calling, presumably with more questions. Everything was unraveling. Celeste's face was pale, her expression uncertain. Footsteps pounded in the hallway outside as neighbors whispered about the near brawl and arrest. That was how my carefully orchestrated life ended up on the brink again. Once more Sabrina had invaded, and once more I was left wondering how I'd let it reach such a fever pitch. I clenched my fists, feeling that old swirl of triumph and dread. My mind thundered with a single notion. I had chosen to step across a moral line. Now I was reaping the consequences, and it wasn't over yet. In the days following Sabrina's arrest, all parties faced investigations. Sabrina was charged with misdemeanor assault and trespassing. James, coaxed by Sabrina's testimony, hesitantly approached the authorities, but lacked physical proof to press charges against me. However, the police questioned me regarding the alleged threat and abduction. I denied it, and with no official complaint or evidence, they let it go. Still, rumors circulated. My lawyer cautioned that a civil suit for emotional distress or alienation of affection could emerge if James collaborated with Sabrina. Meanwhile, Celeste distanced herself, unsettled by the accusations. No one walked away unscathed. Ongoing legal wrangling became my new reality.